A cucumber plant can look perfectly healthy and still stop producing much earlier than it should. The leaves remain green, the vine continues climbing, and small cucumbers appear in several places, so from a distance everything seems fine. Then the growth begins to slow. Some fruits stay thin, others become crooked, and the younger leaves at the top no longer open with the same strength. Most people respond by adding fertilizer. The plant looks tired, so they give it more food. Sometimes that helps, but very often the real problem is not a lack of nutrients. The plant is simply trying to do too many things at once. A cucumber vine grows quickly, and that speed can fool us. It produces leaves, side shoots, flowers, tendrils, and fruit almost at the same time. Every part looks useful, so the natural reaction is to keep everything. But when the plant has to feed too much growth at once, it spends its strength faster than it can recover. Plants are not so different from people. Give one person 10 jobs, and eventually every job begins to suffer. In many Korean gardens, cucumber plants are managed with a different goal. Instead of forcing the largest possible harvest immediately, the gardener helps the vine remain productive for a longer part of the season. That means removing a few things at the correct time, even when those things appear healthy. The first method is difficult for many gardeners because it involves removing the first cucumbers they have been waiting to see. When a young vine begins flowering, some flowers already have a tiny cucumber behind them. These are the female flowers, and naturally they attract attention. People visit the plant every morning, examine the little fruit, and begin imagining the first harvest. Then Uncle Han arrives with scissors. I understand why this feels wrong. You have protected the seedling, watered it, tied it to the support, and waited for the first cucumber. Removing it can feel like throwing away the reward for all that work. But the plant is still young, and that tiny cucumber is already asking it to perform a large job. During the early stage, the vine is building the structure that will support everything later. The roots are spreading through the soil, the main stem is becoming thicker, and the leaves are creating the energy the plant will need once production becomes heavy. When fruit develops too close to the bottom, while the plant is still small, some of that early strength is redirected into feeding a cucumber instead of building the vine. For this reason, I usually remove the female flowers and very small fruits from the lowest section of the plant, often around the first 6 or 7 nodes. A node is simply the point where a leaf, flower, tendril, or side shoot grows from the main stem. There is no need to stand beside the vine with a ruler. The idea is simply to prevent a very young plant from carrying fruit before it has enough structure. Take a step back and compare two plants. One may have a thin stem, small leaves, slow growth at the top, and one large cucumber hanging close to the soil. The other may not have fruit yet, but its vine is thicker, the leaves are opening well, and the top is climbing quickly. The second plant may look less productive today, but it is preparing itself to carry much more later. This is one of the hardest lessons in gardening. The first visible result is not always the result worth keeping. Remove the tiny fruit gently with clean fingers or scissors, taking care not to damage the main stem. Once the vine has grown stronger and reached a good height on the support, the later fruits can remain. At that point, the plant has enough leaves, roots, and active growth to begin carrying a proper crop. There is no exact day when this change happens. The plant gives you the answer through its growth. A strong tip, expanding leaves, and a sturdy main vine usually mean it is ready. Gardening becomes much easier when we stop demanding that every plant follow the same calendar. A little patience at the beginning often gives you a fuller basket later. Uncle Han knows a cheaper way. The second method begins once the plant is established and several cucumbers start forming. This is when the vine can become overloaded without looking obviously unhealthy. A gardener sees 10 tiny cucumbers and immediately imagines 10 mature fruits. I look at the same vine and see 10 hungry mouths asking the plant to feed them at once. That does not mean every extra cucumber must be removed. A strong vine growing in good conditions may support many fruits. The important thing is to avoid treating every plant as though it has unlimited strength. When too many cucumbers develop together, the signs often appear gradually. One fruit grows quickly, while another remains the same size for several days. A cucumber begins straight, but later curves sharply. the growing tip slows down, and the newest leaves become smaller. None of these changes are dramatic by themselves, but together they tell you the plant is struggling to divide its energy. This is where observation matters more than a strict formula. Some growers leave fruit on every node because it feels wasteful to remove anything. Others follow a rigid pattern, keeping one fruit and removing the next whether the plant is strong or weak. Both approaches ignore what the vine is actually doing. A garden is not a factory. The plant in front of you matters more than a rule written on paper. When several cucumbers are developing close together, look at the overall strength of the vine. A plant that is still climbing quickly, producing broad, healthy leaves, and filling its fruit evenly, may not need much intervention. A vine that has slowed at the top, however, is telling you that the current load may be too heavy. Start with the obvious fruit. A cucumber that has stopped growing for several days is unlikely to suddenly become the best fruit on the plant. One that is badly damaged, yellowing, or severely deformed can also be removed while it is still small. A slightly curved cucumber is perfectly fine, of course. We are growing food, not preparing vegetables for a beauty contest. The problem is not imperfection. The problem is allowing a weak fruit to continue taking resources while the rest of the plant is already under pressure. If the vine is carrying several healthy cucumbers at the same time, and new female flowers continue appearing, you can remove some of the youngest flowers before they develop further. There is no need to make a large correction all at once. Remove one or two, then give the plant a few days and watch how it responds. Often, the remaining cucumbers begin filling out more quickly, and the growing tip becomes active again. The plant has not received more fertilizer or more water. It simply has fewer jobs competing for the same amount of energy. This is why counting tiny cucumbers can be misleading. A vine covered with immature fruit may look productive, but the basket at the end of the week tells the real story. 6 cucumbers that mature properly are more useful than 10 that remain small, weak, or misshapen. The goal is not to prevent a heavy harvest. The goal is to avoid exhausting the vine in one short burst. A well-balanced plant can continue flowering and producing after an overloaded plant has already slowed down. That is how we get more cucumbers across the whole season, rather than many small promises at the same time. A good gardener does not only count the fruit, he pays attention to the strength that remains in the plant. Patience is not standing around doing nothing. Patience means watching long enough to understand what the plant is trying to tell you. Uncle Han knows a cheaper way. The third method is about controlling growth that no longer helps the harvest. Cucumber vines grow with great enthusiasm. Leave one alone for a few days, and it may cover the support, reach into the neighboring plant, wrap tendrils around its own leaves, and begin exploring parts of the garden where it was never invited. Sometimes it looks less like a vegetable and more like a plant trying to escape. A large vine is not automatically a productive vine. When the plant becomes too tangled, the inside receives less light, air moves poorly, and it becomes difficult to inspect the flowers and fruit. The plant also spends energy extending side shoots in every direction. The answer is not to cut everything until only a bare stem remains. Healthy leaves are valuable. They make the energy that feeds the cucumbers. The purpose of pruning is not to make the vine look neat. It is to keep the useful growth and prevent unnecessary growth from taking over. Begin with the main vine. Guide it upward along a net, string, or support so that the plant remains easy to inspect. A vertical vine allows the leaves to spread more evenly, and the cucumbers hang where they can be found and harvested before they become oversized. Use loose ties when necessary. A cucumber stem becomes thicker as it grows, so anything wrapped tightly around it can eventually cause damage. The plant needs support, not handcuffs. Next, inspect the side shoots growing from the nodes along the main stem. These smaller vines can also produce leaves and fruit, but when every side shoot is allowed to grow freely, the plant can become an impenetrable wall. For cucumber varieties commonly trained on one main vine, side shoots can be shortened after 2 or 3 nodes. This gives them enough room to contribute some leaves and possibly fruit, without allowing them to dominate the structure. The exact amount depends on the strength of the plant and the space available. A vigorous vine growing in a large garden can support more side growth than a weaker plant crowded into a small area. The scissors should follow the condition of the vine, not the other way around. Do not remove every side shoot in one afternoon. A plant that loses too much foliage suddenly may become stressed, especially during hot weather. Make a few careful cuts, then allow the vine time to adjust. Gardening should feel more like a conversation than an argument. The lower leaves deserve attention as the season continues. Older cucumber leaves eventually become yellow, damaged, shaded, or diseased. Some remain attached long after they have stopped contributing much to the plant. After harvesting fruit from the lower part of the vine, inspect the nearby leaves. A leaf that is still green, healthy, and receiving light should remain. A leaf that is yellowing, badly damaged, or crowded beneath the canopy can be removed gradually. 1 or 2 leaves at a time is usually enough. Some people discover pruning scissors and suddenly behave as though the plant owes them a haircut before a wedding. There is no prize for removing the most leaves. A healthy leaf is still feeding the vine. Only remove growth that has clearly become a burden. As the lower section becomes cleaner, air can move more freely around the stem, and the plant becomes easier to inspect. The difference is not that one vine looks perfect and the other looks ugly. The real difference is that one plant is understandable. On a tangled vine, it becomes difficult to notice a damaged fruit, a yellowing leaf, or a tendril wrapped around the growing tip. On a managed vine, each part has enough space for the gardener to see what is happening. A clean plant is easier to read, and a plant that is easier to read is easier to help. Tendrils also deserve a quick look. Most of them can remain because they help the vine hold on to its support. Occasionally, however, a tendril wraps tightly around a young cucumber, a leaf stem, or the growing tip. As both parts expand, that small coil can begin cutting into the plant. Remove only the ones that are causing trouble. There is no need to invent work where no work exists. This entire method can save money because many gardeners respond to a tired plant by buying another product. First comes fertilizer, then a special growth booster, then a bottle promising bigger cucumbers. Soon the garden shelf has more bottles than the garden has plants. Before buying anything, look carefully at the vine. It may already have enough nutrients. The real problem may be too many fruits, too many side shoots, or a crowded lower section filled with old leaves. Understanding the plant is often cheaper than treating it. Once these 3 methods become familiar, they can be combined into a simple weekly routine. There is no need to spend an entire afternoon examining one cucumber vine. A few calm minutes are usually enough. Begin by harvesting the cucumbers that have reached the correct size. Leaving mature fruit on the plant for too long keeps the vine investing energy in something that should already be in the kitchen. Then look over the younger fruit. A badly damaged cucumber, one that has stopped developing, or an excessive cluster of new fruit can be corrected early. Small decisions are easier on the plant than waiting until everything becomes a serious problem. Follow the main stem upward and check the side shoots. Shorten the ones beginning to take over the support, but leave enough healthy foliage to continue feeding the crop. At the bottom, remove 1 or 2 leaves that are clearly declining. Make sure the main vine remains supported and that the growing tip has room to continue. If a tendril has wrapped around a fruit or leaf stem, release it before it becomes tight. Then step back. This final part is important because gardeners often stand too close. When your face is inside the leaves, every spot, curve, and small imperfection looks like an emergency. From a few steps away, the condition of the whole vine becomes much clearer. A cucumber plant does not need to look perfect. It only needs to remain balanced. The younger growth should continue moving, the leaves should be mostly healthy, and the fruit should be developing at a steady pace. When those things are happening, there is no need to interfere constantly. The plant is doing its work. The gardener's job is simply to avoid making that work harder. That is the idea behind these 3 Korean methods. Removing the earliest low fruit gives a young vine time to build strength before production becomes heavy. Controlling the fruit load prevents that strength from being spent all at once. Managing side shoots and old leaves keeps the plant open, active, and productive as the season continues. None of this requires an expensive product. It requires patience, clean scissors, and enough attention to notice when the plant begins changing direction. A cucumber vine rarely becomes exhausted without warning. The signs usually begin quietly: slower growth near the top, smaller new leaves, fruit that stays thin for too long, or a lower section becoming crowded and yellow. Once you learn to notice those signs early, the plant becomes much easier to manage. You stop reacting to every small imperfection and begin making decisions based on the overall direction of the vine. Do not force the plant to give you everything today. Help it remain strong enough to keep producing tomorrow, next week, and later in the season. Give it support. Keep the load reasonable, and remove only what is no longer helping. That is the Korean way. We do not rush the plant. We help it use its strength wisely. Uncle Han knows a cheaper way.